Lesson 27. Prophecy by Symbolic Actions, Part 11, Groan with Bitter Grief. Scripture reading, Ezekiel chapter 21, verses 1 through 7. Introduction. Today's text describes an incident from the 7th year of the captivity. This is because Ezekiel chapter 20 continues into chapter 21, and the incident of chapter 20 took place in the 7th year of the captivity. Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 1 states, "Now in the 7th year in the 5th month, on the 10th of the month, certain of the elders of Israel came to inquire of the Lord, and sat before me." Moreover, Ezekiel chapter 20 verses 45 through 49 and Ezekiel chapter 20 verses 1 through 7 are connected, and the first prophecy is of a fire, and the second prophecy is of the sword. In this lesson, we will examine the 11th prophecy of a symbolic action. Number 1. Meaning of the symbolic action. First, meaning of groaning. Ezekiel chapter 21 verse 6 states, "As for you, son of man, groan with breaking heart and bitter grief, groan in their sight." Here, groan is anach in Hebrew, meaning to sigh. This word was used to express the suffering of the Israelites during their slavery in Egypt. Exodus chapter 2 verse 23 states, "Now it came about in the course of those many days that the king of Egypt died. And the sons of Israel sighed because of the bondage, and they cried out, and their cry for help because of their bondage rose up to God." Here the word sighed is the same as the word groan in Ezekiel chapter 21 verse 6. Second, meaning of grief. Grief in Ezekiel chapter 21 verse 6 is Meriruth in Hebrew and means deep anguish, as it is derived from the word mara, which means bitter. This word describes a state of heavy weeping and brokenheartedness due to a great shock. Third, meaning of with breaking heart. God told the prophet Ezekiel to groan with breaking heart. Here, breaking heart is shibaron in Hebrew, meaning crush or destruction. This does not merely express a wounded state. It is a state of complete destruction, such as having a completely shattered back so one cannot raise himself up ever again. Thus, Ezekiel was not fighting the pain alone in his room. He threw himself on the ground, crying out loud with shrieks from the excruciating pain in front of a huge crowd in the captive community. This was a prophecy of how painful the impending destruction of Judah would be. Number 2. The blessing for those who groan. First, God puts a mark on the forehead. God puts his mark on the forehead of those who groan for the people's sin and the consequential judgment. The Hebrew word anach, meaning groan, occurs only in Ezekiel chapter 9 and chapter 21 in the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter 9 verse 4 states, "Go through the midst of the city, even through the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of men who sigh and groan over all the abominations which are being committed in its midst." Ezekiel chapter 9 verse 6 states, "Utterly slay old men, young men, maidens, little children, and women, but do not touch any man on whom is the mark." Likewise, those with the mark on the foreheads will be protected from death. Like the prophet Ezekiel, saints must bear and groan for the sin of the people. Second, Jesus' groan. Jesus also groaned when he saw Jerusalem. Luke chapter 19 verse 41 states, "When he approached Jerusalem, he saw the city and wept over it." Here, wept is kleio in Greek, which means mourn, wail, and lament. Those without such groan will not receive the mark of God in the end time. Third, the seal of the end time. God will seal the forehead of the saints in the end time so the tribulation will not come upon them. Revelation chapter 7 verse 3 states, "Do not harm the earth, or the sea, or the trees, until we have sealed the bondservants of our God on their foreheads." Revelation chapter 9 verse 4 also states, "They were told not to hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree, but only the men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads." The bondservants of God have the seal of God on their foreheads and groan and lament for the sins of the people.